Dragon's Dogma 2 is not what you think it is. At least it's not what I think a lot of people believe it to be. I think that a lot of folks have a relatively surface level understanding of what Dragon's Dogma 2 is and what it's going to offer to players, what the experience is going to be like. Maybe they watched a couple videos from IGN, read a couple articles, watched a couple content creators. Hopefully I was one of those. But with that said, I think that people don't necessarily know what they're getting themselves into. I've seen a lot of comparisons drawn to games like Elden Ring, and it couldn't be further from the case. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about the reasons why I think Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to be wildly popular. It's going to receive the praise that it definitely will deserve, but beyond that, I think it's going to be widely misunderstood. So, wolves hunt in packs arisen. Let's begin. Players have grown accustomed to certain mechanics that enable quick reflex actions such as dodge and parries. Games like Elden Ring and the Dark Souls series have set a high standard for how movement and defensive maneuvers contribute to the core gameplay experience. These games have conditioned players to rely on these movements as a fundamental tool for survival, emphasizing a solo player's skill and timing to navigate the dangers of the respective worlds that they're adventuring through. Such mechanics become a second nature to veterans of these kind of games, especially action RPGs. Obviously, this isn't limited to games like Souls-like, but other games leverage these similar mechanics, if not most of them do, providing a tactile sense of control and mastery over the game's challenges. However, Dragon's Dogma 2 takes a different approach to player movement and defense, diverging from the now standardized dodge and parry systems seen in many of today's action RPGs. In Dragon's Dogma 2, most classes don't have a conventional movement skill, like dodge or rolls or quick parries or anything like that. Instead, the game emphasizes more on strategic form of combat and leans heavily on positioning, party dynamics, and preparedness. This distinction sets a very unique stage of gameplay that I'm not really too sure very many people are ready for, where success is less about individual dexterity and more about how well players can orchestrate their party's actions and adapt to the flow of battle. The movement system in Dragon's Dogma 2 is reminiscent of older Resident Evil games or early Monster Hunter games, where positioning and tactical awareness play a crucial role in overcoming challenges. Rather than relying on our quick reflexes to be able to dodge or parry attacks at the very last second, we have to anticipate enemy movements, utilize the terrain to our advantage, and strategically place ourselves and our party members to be able to avoid damage and capitalize on attack opportunities. This approach encourages a completely different type of engagement within the game's world, where understanding our enemies' patterns, exploiting their weaknesses, and synergizing our party's abilities become the keys to victory. A great example of this is shown in clips that we've seen from IGN where they were fighting an ogre. Mechanics like climbing, pushing an enemy to the ground, and learning its elemental weaknesses play a key role in defeating the enemy. Being patient and not just spamming attacks helps to maintain stamina. Sometimes staying out of combat helps to gain a better understanding of an enemy's attacks. More action RPGs have conditioned the players to press the attack as hard as possible and then dodge or parry at the very last second, rinse and repeat. Dragon's Dogma 2 is more about finding the exact precise moments, when to attack, how to attack, what to use, and what part of the monster to use it on. I believe that fighting a chimera exemplifies this. The lion's head is the monster's melee component. It claws, pounces, kicks, and roars. The snake spews an AoE of miasma around the creature. The goat's head casts long-range spells. As a melee class, you wait for the miasma, you attack the snake's head to get rid of the close-range AoE so that that doesn't become a problem later on. Then you focus on the goat head next, climbing on top of the chimera to cut it off, and then you finish the lion once you've destroyed the other heads. Dragon's Dogma 2 isn't a game about fighting an enemy. It's about picking them apart. I played Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen last year for the first time, and I'll be honest with you guys, it felt weird. It felt foreign because so many games over the last few decades, last 2 decades of games, I guess, something like that. Wow, that makes me feel old. But every action RPG that I've played, they have a dodge and parry mechanic. And I would imagine that's probably the same for just about anybody that's watching this video right now, and it feels weird when you go to play a game where that's not standard for every single vocation in the game. Some of them do have it, so if that's something that you want, you can go for those kind of vocations or classes, and you can get that kind of play style, but this isn't a game that you're carrying all the weight by yourself. There's a party of pawns behind you, and leveraging them and knowing how to work and synergize with them is how you win. And Once I got over that, once I really started to understand that and realize that the game is more about taking the time to understand the enemy, figure out their patterns, look at the environment around the enemy, figure out ways I can use that to be able to leverage it against them, figure out their weaknesses and exploit them, pick that enemy apart piece by piece, the game just became so engaging and so rewarding in a way that no other game has really ever replicated other than Dragon's Dogma, and then now Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, because there is really no other games like these. For new players that are coming into Dragon's Dogma 2, the game's unique approach to combat and character roles is going to feel, well, foreign. Unlike many other action RPGs, where the main character stands as the sole hero in confrontation against bosses, enemies, and groups of foes, Dragon's Dogma 2 introduces a dynamic where the player is part of a team consisting of themselves and 3 AI-controlled companions. This shift from a singular focus to a team-oriented perspective significantly alters the gameplay experience and emphasizes the importance of the collective over the individual. In most action RPGs, players are conditioned to optimize their character's ability, their gear, their strategies, and face the challenges ahead. Often, scenarios are framed as me versus them. However, Dragon's Dogma 2 expands upon this concept by requiring players to also manage the vocations, gear, abilities, and even the AI behaviors or the inclinations of their pawns. This aspect means that success in combat doesn't solely hinge on the player's personal skill or their character build, but equally as well as how they've orchestrated their team's actions, their pawns' roles, their compatibility with each other, and how their abilities complement the player's tactics become a very pivotal element to overcoming many of the challenges that the game has. There is this emphasis on planning and coordination that marks a major departure from the lone hero narrative that we've been used to over the years, and this is introducing a layer of strategic depth that goes far beyond personal prowess. Players must invest time into understanding the strengths, weaknesses, and synergies of the different vocations, and meticulously gearing up and configuring their pawns for all of the tasks that face them ahead. Ignoring or neglecting the pawns is not a viable option in Dragon's Dogma 2, as they play a crucial role in both combat and exploration. Their ability to perform in battle, support the player, and interact with the world dramatically influences the outcome of encounters and the overall progression throughout the game. For those players who are unaccustomed to managing a team, or for those who just like to have the spotlight being on them, being the undisputed center of attention, adjusting to Dragon's Dogma 2's cooperative combat mechanics may present a steep learning curve. Yet, this unique approach offers a rich and rewarding experience that encourages creativity, strategic thinking, and a deeper level of engagement than we're used to with many other action RPGs. By shifting the focus from a singular protagonist to a closely knit team of adventurers, Dragon's Dogma 2 challenges traditional action RPG norms and invites players to explore the complexities and the joys of leading a party through a richly imagined fantasy world. Now, to put this into context, when I was playing a sorcerer vocation in Dragon's Dogma 1, I was relatively defenseless against enemy attacks, and I had no solutions for enemies that were immune to magical damage. If I didn't have my party of pawns, or if I had that entire party of pawns and they were sorcerers and rangers, or weren't geared up properly, I would undoubtedly fail quite frequently. Sorcerers are helpless while they're casting spells. They often cannot even move, and they need to have the enemy either distracted or be defended by their party while they're casting their spells. You are the main character in Dragon's Dogma 2, but you're more than that. You're a leader. I'm going to level with you. I ran into this exact issue when I played Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, and that's the reason why I bring it up, because one of the things that I did was completely neglect my main pawn. I didn't change their gear, I didn't upgrade their gear, I didn't search for new equipment or anything like that, I didn't change their vocation at any point. They stayed on the exact same one. I never swapped any of their skills or upgraded any of their skills, and as a result, I started running into walls and was wondering why I couldn't progress, even though my character felt like they were strong and I had done everything that I needed for them. But you can't play Dragon's Dogma 2 in a self-centered way. You have to pay attention to the entire party that you're with. And that's going to be something that I think that it's well worth bringing up. It's something that players need to know before going into Dragon's Dogma 2, because if they do try to play that way, well, they're going to end up finding themselves frustrated when their party continues to fail over and over and over again. Now, one of the other things that I don't see a lot of people talking about either is just that there's so many layers of nuance to the game, and you have to take the time to really understand that. And that is going to be a major barrier of entry for a lot of players. Because I'll just give you a random example. Not all skills are created equally. And many times, before you go out adventuring, before you go out to do a mission, you may need to change the skills that you have equipped because not all of them are going to be suited for every single scenario that you find yourself in. Give you a really good example of this. I played as a magic archer, and the magic archer has this really absolutely disgusting, busted skill called ricochet shot. It is insanely powerful. You shoot it, it bounces, continues to bounce, and every time it bounces and hits an enemy, it does more damage the next time it hits the enemy again. Awesome. Works great in tight spaces, completely useless out in open fields. So having that equipped doesn't make a lot of sense if you're going to hunt something out in the open world. There's a level of preparedness that you have to have, not only just with your character, but with the rest of the characters that you're bringing along, making sure that if you're renting out somebody else's pawn, that it actually suits the things that you're going to do, making sure to take care of your main pawn, checking your skills and abilities, their equipment, everything. All of that matters. And that is a major learning curve. That is a complete departure from what we've been used to in many other action RPGs. And it's something that, well, it's worth talking about. And something that I think compounds with the issues that I brought up earlier is the fact that the game doesn't really give you a lot of direction in this. Dragon's Dogma 2 promises to bring this unparalleled sense of adventure and discovery, tossing aside modern conveniences like quest markers above NPCs for an emergent, explorative experience. This design philosophy aims to immerse players deeply in the world, and the story is going to unfold not through explicit direction and linearity, but instead through actual interactions with NPCs, actively listening to one's pawns, and having a keen observation over one's environment. However, this lack of direction is going to be a serious challenge for a lot of players that are not accustomed to this kind of open world exploration. The game's reluctance to hold players' hands, requiring them to initiate conversations with NPCs and heed the advice of their pawns to uncover quests and understand the intricacies of the world, will lead to some feelings of frustration for players that are used to more structured narratives or more structured action RPGs. Players are going to have to read. They're going to have to actively listen. And that's just not how a lot of modern games have been developed for a very long time. And now this issue is going to be compounded by the fact that the game has, well, sparse fast travel options, with fairy stones and ox carts being very few and far in between. Such limitations necessitate true preparedness for any journey, stocking up on the right supplies, choosing the appropriate skills and equipment and special abilities and everything that you need to be able to complete your objectives. The realism and survival elements that are introduced by this game and all of these different mechanics are there to enhance the sense of adventure, but ultimately are going to steepen the learning curve quite significantly. Now, to add to this lack of direction, the game's world is dynamic, so when NPCs can approach the player and give us quests, they also can potentially die, leaving some storylines completely inaccessible forever. And this is going to add a layer of complexity, but also a level of permanence to our actions. While this feature definitely enriches the narrative and makes the world feel that much more responsive, it's also going to lead to some frustration from players that feel like they're missing out on significant quests or outcomes because of their lack of awareness or preparedness. The game doesn't necessarily give you all context at all given points. The desire for genuine adventure, free from hand-holding, that we've seen that's so prevalent in many contemporary RPGs is understandable and commendable. Yet, the reality of such an experience in Dragon's Dogma 2 might catch players off guard. They think that they want it, but they may learn that they aren't ready for it. As players navigate this meticulously crafted world, the thin line between immersion and frustration are going to become evident, testing our resolve, our patience, and our willingness to be able to embrace a truly open world adventure. Whether the gaming community is ready for this bold departure from convention remains to be seen, but undoubtedly this is going to set the stage for a really unique and memorable experience for those that are willing to adapt and immerse themselves fully. Dragon's Dogma 2 is set to give us an experience that players have been asking for years now. And it's largely something that Baldur's Gate 3 capitalized on, a responsive world that responded to our actions, the actions of the world itself, and it just made the game feel that much more engaging and that much more enjoyable. But more than anything, we got to own our adventure. Our experience was vastly different from the next player, even though the main narrative was, the same. The outcomes of everything that happens in the game wasn't. And we want that. We want more games that are like that, more games that respond to our actions and the decisions that we make. And that's exactly what this game is going to give us. But the game also doesn't have a lot of the context that many other games give us, a lot of information that gets dumped on us. There's a lot of levels of nuance to a game like Dragon's Dogma or Dragon's Dogma 2 that may be lost on some players, and we really do have to take the time to actively listen, actively pay attention far more than we're used to in many other games. Because with all of those conveniences removed, give an example. Something as simple as fast travel. Something as simple as being able to constantly go back to town as quickly as you need to, whenever you want to, and then go back to doing what you were doing is a massive departure from what players have been doing for years. Because in a game like Dragon's Dogma, you can't just fill your inventory with a ton of different stuff. You have very limited inventory. You can only carry so many things, and you can have your pawn carry some stuff, but they also have limited inventory too. So you have to pay attention to what kind of curatives you're going to bring, what kind of other maybe quest items or something like that, other pieces of equipment, making sure that you're taking the time to equip the right spells and skills, and making sure that you're taking care of your equipment and things like that, because the journey is going to be long, and you're not going to be able to fix a lot of these things or change a lot of these things once you're out in the field, and you're going to have to walk all the way back or hopefully grab an ox cart to come back. And that's not going to be the most convenient thing to do. And I think that there are going to be some players that are going to be frustrated with that because it's just not something they're used to. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. That's just you're not used to it. So I do hope that players are a little bit patient with the game because it's an overall experience. We're supposed to be taking the time to really take this game in. And I don't really think people understand exactly how long this game is going to be because of all of these layers of nuance, but also on top of that, the game is 4 times the size of Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. It's going to be massive. So with that said, take your time. I grew up enamored with The Lord of the Rings. I used to pack a backpack with snacks and supplies, head off into the woods with my friends, prepared to fight imaginary beasts, explore the lands, claim untold treasures, and then return well after the sun had already set. Over the years, I have craved a game that could give me a true sense of adventure, an arduous journey where anything could happen at any given moment, and it was more about the adventure itself rather than the rewards at the end. Elden Ring came very close to that, and I believe that Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to take me the rest of the way. This is exactly the game that I've been dreaming of. A massive open world for me to explore where my story is told through my actions, where my experience is going to widely vary from player to player, and I will have next to no context on what to do or where to go, and it's up to me to figure that out. It's up to me to prepare, up to me to listen, up to me to understand. And after playing Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, I have unlearned many of the bad habits that I needed to before going into Dragon's Dogma 2. I can't tell you how many times I died because I couldn't use a dodge roll, because I didn't listen to my pawns when they said, "Bandits stalk the roads, Arisen." Got filtered in the dead of night because I didn't bring a lantern, or ran out of food and stamina or health curatives because I didn't prepare properly. Dragon's Dogma 2 will test players, not in the same way as Elden Ring or Souls games. It's not the kind of game that's about individual skill. It's a test of understanding, strategy, and preparedness. I don't think that Dragon's Dogma 2 is a game that you're going to be able to just bulldoze through without paying attention to everything. Not all enemies or challenges can be won if you hit them hard enough. And that was the challenge for me that I overcame, and I think other players are going to have to as well. I recently watched Asmongold play Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, and it inspired this video because I wholeheartedly agree with his take on why he doesn't want to stream First Dragon's Dogma, because it's not a game to be played without your full attention. If your attention is split 50-50 or 80-20 or whatever it is, chances are you're just not going to pick up on the context, on the nuance that the game has, and as such, you're just not going to have a good time playing the game, you're not going to understand the game, and you're probably definitely not going to beat it. Now, with that said, I'll give you a really good example to back up this claim. The reason why I say this is because in many games, we have bad habits that have been trained by, in my opinion, poor game design. A really good example of this is Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. I love the game. It's a ton of fun. But the NPCs in the game talk incessantly. All useless dialogue, random things that they continue to say. And I really wish that they put an option in the game for me to be able to turn that off because it is so damn annoying. But we've trained ourselves to turn those voices into white noise, into ambience more than anything else. And in a game like Dragon's Dogma, that is so far from the case, it's not even funny. You need to know and hear what your pawns are saying, because if you're not actively listening to them, there's a lot of hints and a lot of things that they're telling you that is incredibly useful and may hinge on you actually finishing a fight or finding something or finding a quest or whatever it might be. The game is designed around the pawns to begin with, so actively paying attention to those NPCs is a massive part of the game. A really good example is if you're fighting an enemy and you don't hear them say, we need to attack its head, we need to attack this other part, or I don't know, the enemy is weak to fire. That's some context that is, well, pretty important. So it's really important to be able to listen to these characters, understand the nuance of the world, and really digest and understand this game. And I think that's something that's going to be a little bit difficult for some players. Now, with that said, I do have one thing that I want to say, and I think that this is going to be really important. Dragon's Dogma 2 and Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen are not games to be consumed. They are games to be learned. They are games to be played. Really played. Pay attention, be patient, but most of all, have fun. Because that's exactly what this game is designed to be. There's going to be a learning curve. There are players that are going to bounce right off of it. But I have a feeling that this game overall is going to be received the way that it should be, which is widely appreciated. I've said this a few times on this channel. Capcom, any of your misgivings aside, has been a banger factory. They have widely been one of the very few AAA studios or AAA companies that are out there that have been pumping out banger after banger after banger. They have been so solid, and it's just so nice to be able to have a company like that that's out there, because they set a trend, hopefully, or can try to set a trend for many of the other studios that are out there, because, well, they raise the standard for that group of studios. So I'm really looking forward to this game. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. You know, for a fact, I'm going to be making videos about it. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys can't wait for Dragon's Dogma 2. I know that I can't. But yeah, that's all I got for today. So if you enjoyed the video, think about subscribing to the channel, liking the video, commenting down below. Join the Patreon if you'd like to support the channel any further. And always try to catch me live. Probably go live right after this video posts, actually. So yeah, I'll be there. Helldivers 2. I've been addicted to that game. But anyway, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, and most of all, I'll see you next time, Arisen. Peace.
Family, 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 family.